Shamyra Howard, Scott Evans, welcome to Jason Unleashed, both of you. How are you both?
Very
I'm well,
well.
thanks. How are you?
I am wonderful. Oh my gosh. Couple to throuple. We are demystifying ethical non-monogamy or polyamory. Shamyra, I want to start with you.
Okay.
There's a stigma that is still attached to polyamory, even though with this show, we are showing it in a very positive light. We're seeing younger millennials, Gen Z, explore, which is a good thing when you are talking about relationships, when you're trying to come to a common ground or discover other facets of what a healthy relationship looks like. What was most surprising for you shooting the show when you got to interact with the couples and the singles?
Well, polyamory is becoming more popular, and especially amongst millennials. And throuppledom is especially becoming more popular. And that was one of the bigger surprises for me, is that because polyamory is about being in multiple relationships at the same time, that these couples were so open to becoming throuples. They weren't they weren't looking for more solo polyamory or experiences. They wanted to experience this relationship dynamic with the person they've been with the longest. And so that was very interesting to me. And what unfolds as in the process, as you can only imagine, is even more mind-blowing. Like, there are so many different things that come up emotionally, educationally, and as it relates to their values and attachments with each other.
I can imagine, Scott, in the first episode, you had said you had your own experience with ethical non-monogamy, and everyone's ears went up like, Scott Evans, we love him on World of Dance, we love him on Access Hollywood. Scott, we want the
How could
tea.
he?
But
Right.
your own experience, what does that mean? What were you, I mean, if you want to reveal, were you in a throuple? Were you approached to be in a throuple?
Here's what I'll tell you. Going out in New York, you get approached for all kinds of things. You know what I
True.
mean? Here's what I'll say. I have been on a journey that I love showed up for me in a way that I would have never expected.
Really?
Right. My partner showed up in a way for me that I would have never expected. And in that, we decided we were not going to do the thing that was expected, that we would show up for each other. We would communicate with one another. We will be open and honest with each other about what we need and what we wanted and what was real in our lives, when it was real in our lives. And we would also do that while being prepared and supported with professionals who were willing to help us create the most authentic and the most healthy dynamic for ourselves. And so, I was excited about this show because I have never seen anything like it on television, right? It is inherently queer. It is challenging the mindsets of not only the participants, but the people who are watching it themselves. You have to show up in a way that you're not necessarily, you can't do the thing you've always done in this show. And while Couple to Throuple will give you everything you've ever wanted in a dating show, you know what I mean?
Sure.
From the humor, the heart, the drama, all of that, it's also going to give you so much more. I remember that morning, that breakfast with our cast, and I sat down and I said, y'all got any questions? And I know this is wild. Y'all got any questions? They were like, yeah. What's the ring? You know what I mean? And so I wanted to show up like any friend would. And you can't require people to show up in a way that is authentic and that is true and that is real, where you're saying honesty is going to be honesty is going to be key here, and then be unwilling to do that yourself.
100%.
And so I shared that with them because, I shared that with them because it was like, listen, I've had the same questions y'all got.
Right.
We in this together. I mean, we're not in it together,
But together.
I mean, they would have loved it.
Right. Everyone's like, does Scott find love in this show? But Scott, thank you for sharing that, because one, I think it makes, I mean, you're such a perfect fit for this. We see that relatability jump through on screen. You are also inquisitive, but you sharing about your own relationship, that you sought professional guidance from
Yes.
people who could offer a safe space, in addition to you being like, hey, as a man, as a millennial yourself, I want what I want in a relationship in a healthy environment. Let me be communicative and, as you just mentioned, authentic and honest. And those are building blocks for a very successful relationship. Shamyra, would you agree?
Absolutely. And Scott was a champion for everyone there. So Scott is such a friend, such a cheerleader, and just a champion of people that people just felt comfortable. And I think it helped to make the experiences a bit more rich by him being there.
Mm-hmm.
And the same can be said for Dr. Shamyra. She has a way of cutting through some of the way we try to show up with like our the presentation, like, okay, this is how I'm gonna do on this, or this is what I'm gonna do on this. She would be in the session. Now, are you sure about that?
Sure.
Are you really being open, and are you really being honest with yourself right now? You know what I mean? In a way that challenged them to dig deeper. This is not an experience that just anybody jumping into is going to be successful. You have to really, really show up. And Dr. Shamyra helped them do it.
Watching the couple, Scott and Dr. Shamyra, one thing that was really refreshing and illuminating was how confident the couples were, albeit scared to try something new. They still had a very strong bond together as a couple that allowed them to go on this journey. And the way that this was positively shown, there was no cattiness. Yes. There was no one-upping or peacocking, if you will, even though this does stream on Peacock, only on Peacock. But Dr. Shamyra, when approaching couples about this topic, what are some of the trepidations that you're finding that they can't get over? What are some of the hurdles that we're going to see this season?
Well, one thing that we'll see whenever someone is trying to open their relationship up is their agreements, right? It's going to be couples have to be on the same page, or people have to be on the same page whenever they're trying to open up their relationship, right? And so what you'll see is that it's sometimes hard to set those agreements because of our values and our attachment. So non-monogamy and polyamory is all connected to our attachment with how we're attached to each other, but also how securely we're attached in our relationships. So what you're going to see is how those attachments in relationships play out and how they welcome other people, and also how their attachment, because the singles in the show had just as much of an experience as the couples, and you're going to see how their own attachments show up as well. Mm-hmm. So being able, if you're thinking about opening up a relationship, or if you're thinking about exploring polyamorous dynamics, you have to know that, one, what's your goal for this? And this is for any type of relationship. If you're dating, you have to have a goal for what you want to do. And then you have to be solid with your agreement, knowing that this is our agreement today at this hour. Tomorrow, I might find a new boundary. And what you'll see, we're going to challenge boundaries. I might find a new boundary based on something that happened, and that agreement will need to change.
We also see...
So we have to be open to change.
Right, open to change is very that, because then, we see a lot of the previews going forward in the season where the couples have the opportunity to swap, to say, okay, you know what? I've had fun with this with this moment. Let me embark on a new moment with somebody else. And in the first episode, the choosing of the throuple, watching that, and Scott, I'm sure when you were there as well, people have to be judged and picked. And when you raise your hand and say, hey, I want to be a part of this throuple, and you step forward or you don't, that also sends a very telling message about preference, attraction, and I guess getting back to what you're saying, Dr. Shamyra, boundaries people are willing to cross, be it racially or with gender, correct?
Correct.
But I'll also add, though, Jason, there's a couple things. One, I love your perception, your perspective, and that you picked up on that this is a moment that is changing. This is a dynamic that is changing, or swapping, so to speak, not a person. And so we want to be very clear, we weren't swapping people. Mm-hmm. We were swapping the dynamic that all parties involved would be involved in. As when it comes to the stepping down, that motion, that action, that visual, it was also our way of making sure of centering consent in all portions of this dynamic and all portions of this experience. That consent needed to be and is center to all of the things that are going on in this show and this experience at the resort, but that it also can change.
Sure.
So while the person added to the relationship, while they might have stepped down and said, yes, I want to accept this role.
Yeah.
At any point, if they discovered this actually is not working for me, they could be out.
Sure. Scott, you mentioned consent, and that was another thing that I was glad that the show really made paramount, was the choice that these couples are making. It's a choice, and the very heavy, in a positive way, open dialogue and conversations between all parties involved as to what they want and that they're okay with this. Scott, you have a lot of fans around the world. People watch you every single day. And again, when you mentioned that you had your own experience, the first thing I thought to myself was, what does love mean to you, Scott? What does love look like to you?
Love to me, this is so fun. I don't know if it's a song. It's a surprising thing, because I think that for me, I thought it would, I had the idea, like most of us, I was raised in this way. This is how love shows up. This is how I expect love to be, and will probably end up the same way that love worked before me, right? I think that when I lost my father, I'm going to be totally honest with you.
Sure.
I think when I lost my father, I looked at the people involved in his life, the people he shared his life with, and I felt another layer of mourning, another layer of grief. Mm-hmm. And I remember praying in his funeral, during his funeral, that love show up for me in the way that it was going to open me up, that it was going to make me most useful, that it was going to be the highest expression of God in my life. And that I wanted to remove, if I was limiting myself in some sort of way, if I was damning myself in some sort of way to an experience that was not my fullest potential, free me of that. And the very next day, someone showed up in my life who shattered
wow,
every experience before. And we have since been able to define what our relationship is going to be for us. We have been able to center our desire and our dedication to learning one another, you know what I mean, in a way that's like, we're fascinated with one another, we are curious about one another, we are interested in each other's success, not just as us as a couple, and we also know that can change.
Yeah.
And being open and honest about how those things show up for us. And so, love for me has been a surprise, and every day, baby, it's another one.
Scott, thank you for revealing, thank you for sharing that the love that showed up for you eviscerated and obliterated every notion of what you thought love should be and love was. And look, success. Both of you, congratulations on this really great show, a really unique show. Couple to Throuple streaming now on Peacock. The one and only Scott Evans and the always incomparable Dr. Shamyra Howard. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for this show, and all the best. Great television.